Welcome back to this Beer with Nat mini-series. On every episode of Beer with Nat, I share a beer and a chat with people who do what they love for a living. But this mini-series is a little different. Instead of chatting with women who work in the beer industry like I normally do, this time I'm chatting with women who don't. Why? To show that it's not just women who work in beer that love it. Over the next 4 episodes, I chat with an actress, archivist, podcaster, and broadcaster, not only about their careers and what it's like to do work that they love for a living, but why beer is their beverage of choice. Today's guest is Gabrielle Corbett, podcast producer and host of the Bitesize Bodacious Babes podcast, a podcast that demystifies the music industry. Gabi tells us about what led her to pursue a career in music, talks us through the different roles she's held, and explains how they've inspired her to start her podcast. We also chat about Gabi's love of beer, how she discovered her go-to style, and what aspect of beer she enjoys most. Gabi's a dark beer fan, so she's got a porter from a local Scottish brewery, and I'm sipping on a stout. We'll each tell you more about our beers of choice shortly. Just a quick heads up, this episode was recorded remotely, so the audio quality is not quite the same as previous seasons, but I hope you still enjoy it. Here's Gabi.
I've got it in my hand, so I feel like I'll press it open.
You nervous it's going to go everywhere?
Yeah, well, I was like, I'll
done
talk
that as
about
well.
it too.
I would love to hear what beer you're drinking and why you love it.
Well, so the one I'm going to do is Tempest. They're a brewer from the Borders in Scotland, from Galashiels, and it's a porter that they make called Elemento. It's a Elemental, and it's a 5.1%, so it's a little bit heavier. But yeah, I really love coffee or chocolatey kind of stouts. So that's the reason. And I also obviously want to pick a Scottish one. And actually my pal who I used to go to uni at works there, Doug Rowe. So yeah, that's why I picked this beer. And they're actually really interesting. Do you know anything about them?
No, not really.
So the kind of couple that started it, they actually started in New Zealand. They were doing home brewing in Christchurch, and then they were moving back to Scotland. So when they moved back, so I think it was in 2010, they decided to get this 10-barrel brewery. They kind of created it in this disused dairy. And that's where it is now in Galashiels. And that's kind of how they started Tempest. And then they've even got to the point now, like they've won quite a few like awards around here, but then they also are really focused on kind of offsetting the carbon footprints. That's quite a big deal for them as well. So they do a few things for that. But they're really cool. They're really like small, beautiful kind of brewery. And like all the ones which probably talk about how I got into beer is like obviously the designs are so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what kind of draws people in maybe nowadays compared to
I
like
think that wins a lot of people over,
yeah.
definitely.
So yeah, that's why I picked that beer. I was actually gonna pick. There was 2 I was saying to you. One is also the Mocha Milk Stout from Drygate, who are a Glasgow-based brewery, and that is amazing. And when I was in London, I remember we were shocked to see it being sold in the Sainsbury's. We were like, yes! So that was something I used to drink quite a lot when I lived in London.
A little taste of home, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, as I mentioned, so I wasn't able to get my hands on the same beer, but I have a stout to enjoy along with you. So I'll kind of be picking up those nice chocolate roasty vibes.
I'll open it now.
I have a collaboration with Cloudwater and Rock Leopard called their Step Up Stout, and I got to try it recently, and it's a very dry stout, loads of roasted coffee, a little bit of sweetness to it. I think you would like it as well, since you like that mocha one and you like your stouts and porters. So yeah, I'll open my beer as well too. We'll have some lovely sound effects.
Oh my God. You know what I also got into? Well, not like, wasn't the best beer to drink, but when we were in London, we used to live beside this like little corner shop, and they would sell like so many. This is before we got into craft beer. These were just like cheap beers just for us to sit outside. And there was one, a Polish beer called Tiski. I'm probably not saying it right, but we were like because it just is the perfect name for a beer. The sound,
yes,
and I was like,
such
yes.
an onomatopoeia. That is perfect.
So
that's hilarious. I have seen cans of that littering the ground near,
great.
near where I live in Bethnal Green. So yes, I actually know exactly what you're on about. So we will get to sip on our beer, and if you have any more revelations about how it's tasting, feel free to chime in as you get started drinking the beer. But what we're going to do is talk a little bit about your career, as you don't work in the beer industry like most of my guests, and then we will of course come back to how you got into beer and what you love about it. So you have worked for many years in the music industry, and now you produce your own podcast and help others to produce their podcast too. So I would love if you could take us back to your early days of your career in music. How did you get into it? What was your first role? And then bring us up to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I suppose, gosh, I think it's like 7 years-ish. But basically, kind of grew up in a musical household anyway. My dad's Irish, mum's Scottish, and very Celtic-y. And my dad actually used to have a record store in Glasgow, but he got it when pretty much CDs came in, and it just flopped after 2 years. And so I never like saw that. That was kind of before my time. So we had a lot of records in the house. And then I think being in Glasgow kind of helped because I always knew I wanted to get into music from just going to gigs. So I started writing little blogs for gigs for this online magazine, but it was called Ion Magazine. You could get it free, but I was on their online thing. And I mean, it was literally like, I think a 30-word review, but I was going to gigs anyway. And I think we mentioned in our chat before, like that very Scottish thing of just trying to get away with anything free. So it helped me get on guest list.
Oh, that was the ulterior
Yeah,
motive. I like
always.
it.
And then yeah, it's a great place to meet people. And then I suppose, and like everything I did like on the side. So I moved after uni. I had a year, no, 6 months. Sorry, not a year. If only a 6 months in Newquay with a few friends. We all went down surfing and just worked at this bar. And it's like a really amazing culture of just like we had a lot of electronic music and then the other kind of stuff, and that kind of got me excited about music. And then I thought, oh, I'll work at the Apple Store in Glasgow because that's music. But it felt like the year I started. So actually, we started in October the same year that Steve Jobs died. It was a very sad time. I think it was like the day
Oh,
before,
wow.
and the whole it kind of changed a bit. Like there were some gigs in store which I really liked. That's why I kind of wanted to work there. And actually, we did a really cool thing in January. They have a thing called Celtic Connections in Scotland. It's a big festival for like Celtic music, and it's very popular, particularly in Glasgow. It's like the heart of it. So we did some gigs. We had James Vincent McMorrow actually come and play at the Apple Store, and I was like, "This is it. This is so exciting! Like, I want to be part of that." But really, what you do at the Apple Store is just sell stuff. You're essentially, it's like Argos. I feel it's the same thing. You go in, you want something, someone goes to get it from downstairs. Just like glorified one of that, and it was really good fun. And met some. The coolest thing about that is it got me to London. So like I just transferred to the Covent Garden store, and you are surrounded by loads of people that work in music. You just didn't realize. So there's a guy called Redinno. He's this DJ. He actually used to DJ a bit in New York, and he's part of this collective, a Scottish collective called I think they're called Colours, or anyway, it was like you're surrounded by that. And then I met this guy called David when I was working in the Apple Store, and I think I was just saying, "Oh, I'd love to work in music. Don't know what's happening." And he was like, "Have you heard of Domino Records?" And I was like, "No, I hadn't really even, as in, I didn't even know there was, I didn't really appreciate there was record labels. I kind of just listened to a lot of music and just loved it and liked going to gigs." And he knew this girl who worked there, and I just met her for a coffee, and she was like, "You can apply, we do internships." So I started off as an intern there. So that would have been 7 years ago, I think. And that was, so Domino Records, if you don't know, is in London, and it is an indie kind of label. And like you probably know them for like Arctic Monkeys, Franz Ferdinand. And then like the people, they were the bands I kind of liked, but I really loved like some electronic stuff. So like Fortet was part of them before he made his own label. Hot Chip, and then a lot of actually Scottish bands that some people won't know as much of, but a lot of Scottish culture, like as well. So that was kind of, I think that helped me get the job actually, because I was Scottish and I was like, I love these bands.
Amazing.
But yeah, it was cool. So it was like an internship first. That was like 2 weeks, and they really liked me and they kept me on as a kind of temp. And then it was actually in February, Valentine's Day. Jackie, who's amazing, and Colleen, who are at the label, they brought me out for lunch and were like, "We'd love to offer you a job as a PR assistant." So I kind of started with doing PR. And then I was actually at the label for 3 years. I did regional radio PR, which was a great way of meeting people in the industry, because I just emailed pretty much every single radio across Britain. That's like, BBC radio with regards to like the Asian network. And then it was like Scottish, Welsh. So it was a really nice way of me getting to understand like different kind of, because you should, if you wanted to do well at that job, you should listen to what kind of music they play as well. So that was really cool.
Hmm.
And that led me to also become, it was a label assistant, so that helped me like work with the marketing team a bit. And I thought, oh, maybe I want to be a project manager. And then I applied for this role at Vivo, which is a video platform, and they needed a coordinator in the music and talent team, which is basically the team that kind of just talk to artists and labels and support and pitch them for like original content we make. And I was there for 3 years and became one of the managers of the music and talent team. And I left there in January this year. So that was all in London. And the reason I left, I loved it, but I just really want to move back to Scotland.
Mm.
So moved back probably at a bizarre time. It kind of felt like it was a great January. I was meeting people from just some, like, I think one of the coolest things I've learned And I would give anyone advice is just email people, talk to people. And if someone says they want to introduce you to someone, just go for it, meet them for a coffee, because I must have met about 20 or 30 people in January who are in the music industry just because one or two people gave me a first intro, and then you're just having coffee with everyone, and then your name starts popping up. So that person that hasn't got back to you initially is like, I should get back to her because some other people have mentioned her. Not that they should see me anyway, but that was really good. And I felt like I was getting somewhere. But then kind of everything kind of happened with regards to like March kind of time. So I had to figure out what I would do to maybe try and do freelance stuff. And then I started doing podcast consultancy, web design, and podcast editing. Um, yeah, so it's actually been, I feel like I've learned a lot of skills. I feel like I've done my own university or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you're certainly keeping yourself so busy. And when did you actually start your podcast, which is
Oh
Bitesize
yeah, I
Bodacious
haven't
Babes?
spoken about that.
It's all right.
um,
I'm here to help make sure we pull out all the bits we want to talk about.
yeah, so that was in the summer last year. So that's when I started recording it. And the reason I kind of wanted to record that was I had met some amazing people, actually mainly at Domino, and a lot of us had moved on to different places. And you'll notice like pretty much every guest used to work at Domino or knew someone that worked at Domino, because it's just this beautiful group of women. And yeah, it was just a bit frustrating. I had like cousins or pals who said they always wanted to be in music, but they didn't know where to go. And then you'd hear that they're a lawyer and you're like, you could do music law. Or there's just so
Mhm.
many elements that they just didn't realize were roles and job titles in the industry. And a few of my friends and I got frustrated about that ourselves anyway. And then also, like, there's a lot of guys in the industry, and it's just kind of what you do, the same thing, just like showcasing there's actually loads of women in the industry. Maybe it's just not spoken about enough. So I asked just pals of mine if they want to come around for dinner and chat. And that's kind of how it all started. And we focus on maybe a particular job title. So we have one that's like being a radio PR. So I have two girls that come in and they spoke about being radio PR. So one is at a record label called Beggars, and there's another one who has her own radio PR that she set up with a friend of mine who used to work at Domino, called Ghost
Like
PR.
a running theme
Yeah,
here.
keeps going. But yeah, and then it just kind of, yeah. So we start recording, yeah, in the summer. Then I had to figure out, how do I edit it? How do I pitch it to like, or like, how do you even get it up online? Like, how does this work? So I didn't
Mhm.
launch it till September, and that was good fun. Did a trailer. A trailer is a great way of just delivering something and figuring out how do the platforms digest it, and what things do you need? Like, what size of imagery should you have for your artwork? And how's your artwork going to look if you look on a phone compared to on a computer screen? And so I've constantly been changing things, and I wanted to create my own website as well. And I don't go through a hosting service because, again, that like wanted to do it for figure out how I could do it for free. But also I just really wanted to learn, and maybe I'll move on to that at some point. But yeah, so I think we're on episode 21 at the moment, and a few more have been recorded. And only in the last month I decided to do this extra thing which you've joined me on, which is fantastic, called kind of bite-sized podcast profile, which is just sharing a kind of light on other podcasts and giving a wee snapshot of what they are and giving little bite-sized chunks of that particular industry or topic. But yeah, I think that's it. I hope.
Yeah, it's quite cool that you've started in the music industry, and I think, like you said, I mean, for me, not being a part of it, I have no idea how to get in, what the roles are, what the opportunities are, and so what I do with Beer with Nat usually is sort of exactly what you're doing for the music industry, letting people know what the opportunities are should they want to come work in the industry, and putting real voices and real stories behind it, so that people know, oh, she's just like me, she did this thing and now she works in the industry, and now you've taken what you've learned from the music industry and moved it specifically to podcasts,
Mm.
which is quite cool. And now you're able to use all the things that you've taught yourself to help other people with their podcasts, which I think is a really nice progress.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just because like you're probably the same. Like you have a few friends who are like, "Oh, I want to do it," and you're like, "You can do it. You can do it for free." And especially now because you can get away with being like, "Right, we're going to record this online now," because before you had to worry about getting to the person's house, and that's a cost as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think also the I think people are not always aware of like what software they already have. So if you have a Mac, you've got GarageBand built in. That's free. You've got QuickTime
Yep,
built
that's what I
in.
use as well.
Yeah, and and then obviously I started fiddling about with Audacity as well as a software, because everyone
Mhm.
was talking about that. So, and there's 1,000 YouTube videos that you can go on and teach yourself stuff. So if you're that kind of mentality and you enjoy that, it's like a great free thing to do. And yeah, like I kind of was saying to you, I've started trying to take screenshots and then write Medium posts of being like a quick how to or kind of step by step guide to hopefully make it simpler and easier so they don't have to go through this big article instead to kind of figure out simple things like, you get intimidated, let's say the first time you've ever recorded on Zoom and you're so like you're sweating away, you've got your guest ready and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? If you just seen someone else do it first, you might feel a bit better.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can go not only listen to Gabby's podcast, but go look at well, you can let us know what your Medium page is,
Yeah.
and I'll put it in the show notes as well, so everyone
Definitely.
can go
Yeah.
if they want to start a podcast to get all your tips. Now on to the second part of our conversation, which is because outside of the music industry and the podcast world, you are a beer lover.
Yes.
So what first got you into beer?
So I suppose like, when you're younger, you want to get into beer. And especially I wanted to get into Guinness because my dad was from Dublin and we would go over there a bit. And I have two brothers and we'd all like have Guinness and I just didn't like it. I really wanted to, but I was like, and it's funny because now the stout's the thing I like. So maybe I always knew it was going to happen. And actually, I used to work at this club in Glasgow called ABC, which unfortunately actually burnt down like a while ago. But
My goodness.
on a Saturday night, we used to do drinks at 4 a.m. when you finished. And my friend used to give me as a wee, like a half Guinness. I think it was with cranberry juice in it, and it's called something in particular. I cannot remember the name.
Does it have blackcurrant and might it be
Oh,
called a
blackcurrant. It's blackcurrant,
yeah.
yeah. What's it
Yep.
called?
Well, there was a version which was a snake bite, which was like Guinness and cider and blackcurrant.
Yeah.
But yeah, my granny drinks it that way as well, just Guinness with a bit of blackcurrant. There is a name for it,
Nice.
but I can't remember it either. But yeah, it just sweetens it up ever so slightly.
And I just absolutely loved it. Like, it was one of my favorite things. That kind of got me into that, I suppose. And then I kind of fell from that. Like, so it wasn't until the last, I don't know, maybe like 3 years I've got into Guinness. And it was probably more when my boyfriend and I went to Denver and we were staying with pals. And there's a really great place called Rhino in Denver. It's basically
Mhm.
like
The River North District. Yeah, it's so
Yeah, it's
cool.
like the classic, like super trendy. There's loads and loads of craft beers, loads and loads of pizza places, all in
Everything's in
an
an old
industrial.
warehouse.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's like exactly. It's like couldn't be more what you expect. But the cool thing about that was I liked that you could get. That was the first time I really had. We'd sit down and we'd have a proper flight of like of beers, so I could try lots
Mhm.
of different things. And then I think I must have had some sort of stout that I enjoyed a bit, or I was just ordering it anyway. And then we started to see a few of the guys over there were doing these beautiful collaborations with local coffee breweries. And they had like cold brew coffee and they would mix them with stouts. So, like nitro coffee with kind of stouts.
Mhm.
And I think I can't remember the name of the ones we did, but basically the whole trip ended up when we were there in particular, just going and be like, right, what's your coffee stout? What have you guys got? What's your tropical stout? And that's like that was it. Then I was like, I'm hooked. And then I suppose in London it was like, right, how can we source this? And at the time my boyfriend was working with a brewery called Four Pure, helping out with them.
Mhm.
And that was they had an oatmeal stout. And that was
Oh,
in
yeah,
South
that one's delicious.
so good, and I was in South London, and yeah, I think that's how it all started, and
Yeah, so
then
you really identified your go-to style and just found
yeah,
it at all these different
like,
breweries.
I do like, and I think I tried to actually, to be fair, actually, the first beers I probably got into because I think people think, "Oh, if you haven't had beer before, you should probably have, like, a mango-y or, like, a citrusy IPA." So I used to drink the Beavertown Gamma Ray, like, yeah, their main one that everyone did, and I remember, like, when Beavertown first kinda came to London, and they were at actually the first time I saw them was at a record store, a record label kind of
Oh, how funny. So your 2 worlds were already
yeah.
colliding there.
Yeah, so like they used to where is it? It's in Spitalfields, I think. And you used to like have it was independent record label kind of festival and you'd showcase like all the different indies would be there. So I was
Yep.
there for Domino and then they had the brewery there as well and Beavertown
Yeah,
were
they
down
started
there.
doing a beer festival at the same
Yeah.
time. Yep.
Yeah, so this is perfect combination. Then obviously, like I suppose the same with music, that you have these beautiful album artworks, and that's the same with like the design with Beavertown. I think in particular, it was just so out there and so notable compared to everything else that was sitting beside it. I think at that time, and then it felt like everyone started to then be like, right, design, design, design. And then when you go into like beer shops, there's a really great one in South London called, oh, they do hot sauces and beer.
Yeah, hot
Um,
burns and
Hot
black.
burn, yeah, hot burns in black, and like you'd walk in there and you'd just, like, see everything. Some of them are crazy expensive, but especially I think actually the coffee stouts I think are the most expensive ones. But you treat yourself, and yeah, that was fun. And actually, the funny you made me remember when I was doing some notes for this. When I was at Domino, the Domino Records did a collaboration with this Copenhagen brewery called Mikkeller,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah,
yeah, and I
Mikkeller is very
totally
popular.
forgot. I totally forgot, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we had these." I think we made one for a band called Real Estate, White Lung, and maybe I can't remember the last one, but they were really interesting. If you Google it, it was in 2006. Just Google Mikkeller and Domino Records, and it'll pop up, and you'll see the bottles. But yeah, so it kind of maybe has like mixed over.
Yeah, right. There do seem to be a lot of breweries that have some sort of interest in music, or yeah, they're doing collaborative brews with different bands. Yeah, what do you think is the perception of beer in the music industry for women in particular? Was it normal for you to be drinking a beer at an event if you went out to one, or would most women be drinking something else?
I don't know. That's a good question. The funny thing is, I think a lot of the venues, like, you still were just having like, a lot of them are now all like owned by like big companies. So you're not having like a lot of craft beer. I think
Hmm.
maybe in the last maybe 2 or 3 years I started to notice craft beers, but like, yeah, okay, you might just have Beavertown, or you'd have like Camden Hales. Like, you'd only have an IPA or a pale ale. You
Yeah,
wouldn't
you
have
couldn't
like,
get a good stout anywhere for you
you
at
would
the
never get a
time.
stout. Exactly. And yeah, I suppose actually, I think, to be fair, I think the music industry is quite beery. I'd say there were quite a few women drinking beers and stuff. Yeah, so maybe they were. Yeah, so I suppose that's an industry potentially that it was probably more
There's already
accepted
that bit
as,
of crossover there. Yeah, like
yeah,
you said, it's a bit more
it's the
acceptable.
cheapest thing to get at a gig. So,
That's
like,
a
if you're
very good
talking
point.
about, like, as in maybe not the craft ones, but like, okay, so like if you go to Brixton and you go to the OT Academy there, most people are going to drink the beer because it's cheaper, and then everyone's going to buy that 2 pint one you can get and walk through the crowd and pour it everywhere. So I feel like beer and gigs seem to go hand in hand. Like, every festival you go to, the amount of times you would have got beer thrown on you, like,
Yeah,
it's just,
that's a very good point. Your plastic pints just spilling over.
yeah. So yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, and that's funny you say that as well, because I used to work at festivals when I could, and the way you would do that is working at the bar. So you just drink the beer there because it was free.
Another way to get in, hear the music, be a part of it all. Yeah, while
Yeah.
doing a bit of work. And
Yeah.
whenever you were learning more about beer, did you ever feel, or sort of getting more involved in the beer world, did you ever feel any sort of intimidation yourself? Or you're like, I know I love my coffee stouts. Go up to the bar and ask for one.
Yeah, I think, like, maybe that was it. I was like, "I'm just gonna learn." It's like, remember when you were like, we're probably, like, drinking sensibly, of course, underage, but you'd learn that one drink that you'd order
Yeah,
it really
you
sensibly at
find
the
your
bar.
thing.
I think
Yep.
my first one was Jack Daniels and Coke, because I heard this older guy order it once, and that was quite expensive as well. I remember, like, "This is a bad choice." But yeah, I think the frustrating thing sometimes is when if you're at the brewery anyway, of course, everyone's expecting you to buy beer, that's fine. But I think when you're out, sometimes it feels like, "Oh, do you want a beer?" My main one I've got recently is people are like, they're like, "Oh, you want whiskey?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love a whiskey." Like, not just, and it's funny because obviously I'm Scottish, so they might think I'll drink whiskey, but because you're a girl, you're like not the one that drinks whiskey. So like, it's
Yep.
always they'll ask my boyfriend instead, like, "You must be a whiskey man." And my boyfriend's like, "Actually, Gabby is actually more into whiskey than me." It happens all the time, and you sound like you're putting on a show, but you're like, "No, I really like it. Like,
Yeah,
just
I enjoy
buy
these
me the
flavors.
whiskey."
Why can you
Yeah,
not enjoy these flavors?
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of frustrating.
Do you think there's anything we could do to change that perception, whether it is around, women liking strong beers or coffee-focused beers or whiskeys? Are there any things we can do, or is it just up to us to be like, "Nope, I like what I like, and you need to learn to accept it?"
I think what you're doing is actually the way to do it, is just kind of like anything, like showcasing that it's just a thing that lots of people like to drink. And you shouldn't be so shocked that women might order a whiskey, or they think it's, oh, they're doing it, they're trying to impress us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, right, so it's just about normalizing it and being like,
yeah,
"We all have taste buds. We can all enjoy anything we like."
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I suppose it's funny, like you were saying, what when we're listening and drinking this, like, what kind of taste should I get? And I've never really thought about that. I definitely know I don't like, if I'm given a beer and I don't like it, I'm like, I don't really want to drink it. So it's funny. I think it's definitely maybe a dry taste. I do quite like really bitter things,
Mhm.
with regards to other drinks, and quite strong taste. So I think that's why, like, if you drink this Tempest beer, it's quite strong and overwhelming. I think if you were to drink, if it was your first like oatmeal portery stout, you'd be like, "This is a bit much." I
But
think
you've worked your way up to
I've
it.
worked my way up to it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things I love about beer. There really is something for everyone. So if you are a coffee lover, there's a place to come into it. If you like gin and tonics, there's a place to come into it. If you like
Mhm,
whiskey, there's a place to come into it, that sort of thing. So there are
definitely.
different beers for every flavor palette. What would you say is the thing that you enjoy most about beer? And it doesn't have to just be the liquid.
That's a great question. I suppose another thing that got me into beer was like the summer. So it's that like there's this lovely feeling of just being outside, having, and that's when I would have like a beer, like a more of a beer Moretti kind of thing, like a light beer with like some
Mhm.
nuts and crisps, just sitting around. Oh, even on your own, I just love that. And I think the thing with the porter ones and the coffee stouts is I don't it feels like they feel quite, not meaty is the wrong word, but they feel like a proper
Yeah, a bit
drink, so I feel like I'm
heavier. Yeah, a bit
heavier,
more intense.
so I'm getting more out of it and stuff, but yeah, I think it's like sitting outside or it's funny, like, honestly, it's only the last year I think I've been like, "Oh, I'm gonna have the beer instead of like a gin and tonic or like whiskey or wine." You can sip it really slowly, I think that's maybe it as well, you can really enjoy it and take your time with it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't often order by pints. I kind of like to get a half pint and
No.
enjoy that and then go back up and try something
So
new
I
and
yeah, I can't drink pints. I'm exactly the same. Always half pints or the can's great. Or even to begin with, I'd like have a half can with someone. I really like I'm definitely that person if you come for dinner or we go out for dinner, I'd be like, I would like to try everything.
yeah, exactly. "Can we share this one?" Yep, I do
Yeah.
that as well.
I think that's a nice way. Actually, me and my boyfriend used to do that a lot with regards to beers. So that we'd buy like we go and we buy like four or few, like few that we know, a few that we don't, and then we'll like have a half can each. And that's a really nice way of getting to know something.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I'm sure because he worked in the industry as well, then you can both appreciate it and enjoy it together, which is really
Yeah.
nice.
But do you know the thing actually that you just made me think is there's that definitely classic like, oh, you'll love like a strawberry, you probably like a sweet beer because I think this is perception of like a girl would love like sweet
Yep.
strawberries, mangoes, and all that stuff. And I'm always like, I feel like I tell people that no, and then they'll bring it up again. I'm like, no, no, I don't like that beer.
I know what I like. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it does just take more of us being like, "Yep, we're confident in what we like, and
yeah,
we'd like to order for ourselves, please. Thank you."
yeah. I think that's like the confidence. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, normally on Beer with Nat, I'm talking to other women in the beer industry to kind of highlight what roles are available and also the amazing women to follow and learn from as you're getting to know more about beer. So I would love to know if there are any other women that you would like to shout out who have either helped in your career path or who helped you in your beery journey to help to learn more about beer. I know you've got an entire podcast full of women to shout out. So if you just want to simply say that, you are more than welcome to. But yeah, I would love to hear if there's any people you'd
Yeah.
like to shine a little spotlight on.
Well, that's funny. I was just I had a moment of like, oh my god, but no, you've just made me think of something that I'd thought of earlier. So yeah, first of all, obviously the podcast is great with regards to every single woman on that is amazing at their job. And I think they didn't even realize that until they come on the podcast. Sometimes you talk about yourself, how you got somewhere. So if you're ever interested in any kind of musical career or just there, we always do kind of like, what do you do now? Like, what's the role? Advice. But a lot of the advice ends up being like life advice. Like one of them's like, just don't be a dick and things like that. And then they all shout out really interesting people and music too. But actually, there was a girl who I don't even know that well, but with regards to beer and design, something I actually love as well is the tap designs at some of the breweries, or sorry,
Yeah.
at the pubs. So in South London, in Camberwell, there is a craft beer place. Do you remember the name? Oh my
Is it
gosh.
Stormbird?
Stormbird, yes, and they
Yeah.
have the taps there are great. So they have like a lot of the local like either artists or people that go to the I think the universities and stuff, they design some of the taps. They've got like a Beavertown one there as well. And I was at this talk event in I think February by a community called Glug Events, and they
Mhm.
showcase designers. And they had this girl called Studio Emma is her like tag on Instagram, and she does this amazing stuff with concrete, mad colors and concrete, and she made this tap for a concrete tap for a particular brewery. I'll get the name of it actually,
Oh, wow, that's
and
so interesting.
I just love having this like collab of like, okay, I love design, I love what she does, there's loads of color. Then she's making taps. So it was for a brewery called Shindigger Brewing.
Hmm.
And she made the beer tap handles, part of the New Music Scotland Awards, part of the Say Awards. So it's part of the trophies. And it's just like that, again, this collaboration of like the music design beer. So I'd love to shout her out. We don't even know each other that well, but I think she's amazing. And visually to see those taps, I think that's another really cool part of beer that maybe people don't think about.
Yeah, that's a great point. The design, the creativity that comes in not just from the brewers, but from all the other people involved in making a beer what it is. So,
Yeah.
oh, that's so cool. Okay, perfect. Well, that's all I've got to say. So, thank you
Great.
so much for joining me and for sharing not only everything you know about the music side of things, the podcast side of things, but your love of beer as well. So, thank
Yeah.
you very much.
That was a pleasure.
Thanks again for your time, Gabi. Be sure to check out Gabi's podcast, Bitesize Bodacious Babes, on all platforms. You'll also find a link to Gabi's Medium page and Studio Emma's Instagram in the show notes. Come on back next week to hear from journalist, broadcaster, and beer lover, Marvarine Cole. Chat soon.